Hey, Reef Builders, and welcome to session 126 of the Reef Therapy Podcast powered by CaliKid Corals. CaliKid, the ultimate coral experience. New for 2025, if you go to calikidcorals.com/reef builders and you sign up for their SMS program there, you can receive 15% off their next auctions or the WYSIWYG section on the website. And as always, we will give away a couple $50 gift cards, Center. And in light of today's session, tell us what your favorite Australian coral is. Is it Goniopora? Is it a Bower Banky? Let us know in the comments, and maybe the one that you've got in your tank that is your favorite when it comes to Australian corals. If you missed it, just a little bit of housekeeping. The 12-hour Reef Recapathon is now available on the Reef Therapy YouTube page or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Salem, I do want to say that we were so good at keeping that at 12 hours, right? And YouTube still screwed us on the back end and took away 6 minutes of Julian Sprung.
Everyone was very mad. The comments were like, what happened to Julian? Just cut him off mid-sentence. Only 6 minutes are missing, though. We got the rest.
We did so much research, though, to make sure that we were like bang on 12 hours.
It was 11:59. We had like the minute window. It worked out well, but I guess not.
It did not. Anyway, so you get 11 hours and 54 minutes of everything else. So good luck wading through all that stuff. Thank you for allowing us a little bit of time here at the beginning of the year to regroup, get our bearings set, but we're good for 2025 and Reef Therapy to continue. Let's jump right in. Our first guest of 2025, Daniel Kimberley, owner of Monsoon Aquatics in Australia. Good morning, because it's morning where you are. How are you doing?
Good evening, Remy. Good evening, Salem. Yeah, I'm great. Living the dream, as we Aussies say.
Sorry, I should have said, how are you going?
How you going, mate?
How you going?
Yeah, and the Aussie answer would be, not bad, pretty good.
Let's start with just an easy softball question, just to get to know you, get to know Monsoon Aquatics a little bit. Tell us what Monsoon Aquatics is and how it came to be.
God, that's not an easy question. Okay, well, the short answer is Monsoon Aquatics is my obsession, a business built out of a love of the ocean and aquariums from a very young age. I started Monsoon Aquatics 17 years ago in the Northern Territory in Darwin. And essentially, we started off as a boutique coral collector. So we sort of brought the Northern Territory Euphilia pariencora, the branching hammers, to the market, the NT micromussas, the Christmas rock, and we were just doing coral and maybe some scribble angels and things. It was just me and a tinny, and then we ended up getting a bigger 20-meter boat and started getting staff, and then got to a point where it's like, well, I either go headlong into this business thing and step away from the boats and work on the business, or I stay as the boat operator. And I chose to step away from that and sort of build the business. My wife Brooke entered and became our general manager, and then things just sort of took off. We expanded into Cairns, then we expanded to Bundaberg and to Western Australia. So we now operate from Western Australia all the way down to Bundaberg and out in the Coral Sea. And it's a massive, expansive area that we cover. Wild caught's our bread and butter, collecting, harvesting, processing and selling wild pieces. But our real passion, or my real passion as well, is now conservation aquaculture. And our Bundaberg site is a dedicated aquaculture farm where we just produce corals by propagation, multiple generations and spawning. And the next big thing for us is that reef restoration, using the conservation aquaculture techniques we've learnt and honed for the hobby, for reef restoration, which is going to start this year.
So before we dive into sustainably, getting wild caught stuff or spawning or any of that stuff, you're out on the ocean a lot, or at least your divers are. You just got back, you said, from vacation, so you obviously have seen how the reef looks. So how we hear is doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
Whenever there's anything about coral reefs, it's always doom and gloom. And we are a little conditioned here. The Caribbean has taken a hit over the past several years.
Yeah.
It's not looking good. But so how is it on the Great Barrier Reef right now?
If you were to take a snapshot right now, great, excellent, looks perfect. Um, this time of year traditionally is when we start to see bleaching, and we've just been notified by our government, our fisheries management, that we've triggered a management response in our fishery for consecutive heating weeks. So what that means is that the ocean temperature has been consecutively warming over the past 6 weeks, which usually means we'll start to see some bleaching after that. So short answer, in a snapshot, looks great. But if you zoom out and look at the big picture, it's kind of like a stock market. You know, you go really well and you have a crash. You go really well, you have a crash. But is that trend line going up or is it going down? I think the jury's still out. Even the top scientists go sort of back and forth in Australia from, no, things are good to, oh God, things are stuffed. But having said all of that, I'm still very hopeful about the future of the reef. And the difference with being hopeful and optimistic to me is hopeful is not just going to sit back and not do anything and like, nah, she'll be right, mate, like the Aussie, you know, we spoke about before. It's actually, I'm hopeful that it will be a good outcome for the reef because we can actually intervene and start doing things. And that's the difference, I guess. So I think we need to be alert, but not alarmed. So there's not doom and gloom, but we really do need to be alert on what's happening out on our reef. I know I'm familiar with what's happened in the Caribbean, Florida. That's heartbreaking, and I don't want to see that happen over here.
So whenever there is a crash, does the Australian government, the fisheries, do they kind of does that trickle down to you for collection? Like, is there a quench on certain CITES and like you can't issue them at that time, or how does that work?
No, our fisheries management works a little bit differently, probably to maybe what you guys are familiar with other countries. Our fisheries management is a quota-based system that is separate to our CITES. So our state governments, whether they be West Australia, Northern Territory or Queensland, they manage the catch in that jurisdiction. And they manage that catch by placing caps or limits on each species. So every species now in Australia has a cap, has a quota. In the past, it was a basket quota. So if you had 1 tonne of quota, for example, you could go out and get, in theory, 1 tonne of one type of coral. But these days, we've improved that and it's species specific. So the response to management from climate change has been to tighten up our quotas, reduce the quotas, and make them species specific. And then we have trigger points. So we have what we call harvest strategies in Australia. And that is it's a document that outlines the set agreed triggers and responses when it comes to anything to do with the fishery, whether it be declining harvest, increasing harvest, climate change, cyclones, whatever that might be. We have a set condition. If this happens, X happens. And when it comes to bleaching, we do have triggers. So if it's a certain percentage of bleaching or consecutive heating weeks, that triggers a response for management to have a close look at the fishery. As fishers, we have a code of conduct that immediately triggers site surveys and not collecting certain corals in certain depths, not taking certain fish that are important for grazing on the reef. So we do have all these proactive triggers that we implement.
So those triggers, have they been consistent across the years? Like, are the same species kind of affected or protected in these events, or is it seemingly sporadic or random?
It can be really random, hey? Yeah, like I know where I live in Bundaberg here, we had some bleaching last year, and the sites that I spearfish and snorkel right out the front of my house with my kids, you know, we get acans, monties, some acropora and soft corals. The montipora was really quite significantly affected to the point where a lot of it died. But everything else around it was fine. And then in other areas of the reef, different species can be affected to differing degrees. And I think one thing to keep in note is that when we talk about mass bleaching, traditionally the surveys have been done by air. They're now doing a lot more in the water, but they would do an aerial survey, and if they would see bleached corals on a reef, you know, that reef could be classed as affected by bleaching. but it might be very patchy. So you've got to take it into context. The Great Barrier Reef is so big, like it's almost hard to get a picture in your mind until you're out there and you just look at it and you're like, this is massive. This is bigger than a lot of European countries. So to talk about a blanket change or effect is kind of sometimes, really not accurate. It can be really quite patchy. But again, as I say, I'm not trying to discount it or brush it aside. I think it's definitely something that we need to be concerned about and manage. But the reef's still there. You don't have to rush out and get your dive ticket now, so you don't miss seeing it. It's going to be around for a lot longer. And if I've got anything to do with it, it will be around for many generations to come.
So with you mentioned Bundaberg and Cairns, where your two locations are. Those are two very different geographical locations on the Great Barrier Reef. So what are there some species specific southern versus northern corals that you might see?
Most definitely, 100%. Yeah. So Bundaberg is the gateway to the southern Great Barrier Reef, where we get mixes of temperate fish and tropical fish, on the same reef. I guess from your point of view, acans is really dominant in this area. And as we move a bit further north into Mackay, you start getting the scollies and the bowerbankies. In an area around just south of Mackay in a really muddy bay, you get the Trachyphilia that you're familiar with. Then if you head up to Cairns, you're getting corals like, mainly Aquapora. A lot of our good Aquapora comes from out of Cairns. You're getting the Stokeside, Goniopora. The trackies up there, for whatever reason, are that small compared to, the ones down here, which are like that. So far, we think they're the same species. There's a lot of Duncan Opsamia up in Cairns is very spindly and branchy, lives in deep water. Down here, it's often in shallow water. It's very thick plating and bright green, So definitely unique corals with each region, which is why we have a boat stationed in Darwin that collects in West Australia and the Northern Territory, because we get our good blasto, our branching hammers, our green bubble, Christmas rock, our clams, all that unique stuff is up there. You don't find that down here in Queensland, and likewise with Cairns. So you really do have to, I guess the beauty with what we do is that our specific boats can focus on what's good in their area. They don't have to hold up a whole business and collect subpar product, because the guys in Darwin know that the acro is better in Cairns, so leave that to Cairns. And vice versa, the guys in Cairns know that the Fabias, the Helio, Fungia, the branching hammer, and are better in Darwin. So we can really hone and focus our collection efforts.
So what's that effort kind of like supply chain wise? Do you have one export facility, so you bring it all back to one place, or do you have like a place you ship out of in Western Aussie versus the Northern Territory? How's that work?
No, so we used to, but this year last year we consolidated operations just to I guess increase efficiency, and we're a business, so to try and increase our profits. We just have our wild caught all comes out of Cairns. So when the boat in Northern Territory collects, they pack off the boat. They send the boxes, generally dry pack, so with wet paper to get most product in there, and some corals are packed in water. They'll send that to Cairns, and they'll send a portion of that to the farm in Bundaberg to stock up broodstock levels for the farm. And same thing with the boat in Yeppoon, which is a little bit north of Bundy. They'll send all their wild caught product to Cairns. That's where it all gets shipped from, the Cairns.
So your broodstock, what are you spawning and growing? What's the stuff that you hold back that you don't ship out? That's what I'm really curious about.
Too much? No, not too much. We are shipping out scollies and Acanthostria pachycepta now, so we've sold some of those, but we've spawned over a dozen species now. Initially, we focused on scollies and acans because, limited quota, very geographically found in a very limited area. So that was our focus. Nothing known about those on the scientific world compared to, say, your Acropora and Passilloporas, which are fairly well researched. So that was kind of groundbreaking stuff. And we've I'm not going to say we've nailed it, but we definitely, every year we do it, we get better. So we're 4 years in with that now. But we've spawned everything from Euphilia ancoras, para-ancoras, glabrescents, your acans, your scollies. We've spawned trackies, we've spawned Goniopora, Aquapora, so strawberry shortcake and tenuous, spathulata. A whole range of species that we've spawned and we've got growing out here now.
What would you say the percentage is between, and maybe you guys are all you're spawning all in the actual farm right now, but in talking with some other Australian vendors, it seems like pulling like gravid corals from the ocean and then having them spawn in the facility is another way of doing that. What's the percentage of corals that you do that with versus like now we've got scollies that have produced a couple different generations?
We're not there yet. So I would say some of our frag scollies spawned and acans, but 90% of what we're spawning is we've harvested broodstock from the wild, not as they're gravid, but before they're coming into season. If you harvest them as they're gravid, they can actually trigger and you've missed it. So we get them a couple of months before predicted spawning date, and we spawn from them. I think one thing to keep in mind is that this is a marathon. In terms of, and this was something that was said to me by someone far smarter than me at the Australian Institute of Marine Science. He said, coral spawning, conservation aquaculture, it's a marathon. And we're in that first few steps of that marathon, which essentially saying is we know sweet F all. Pardon my friend. We don't know much about it. So multi-generation captive bred true spawning, we're still a little bit off that. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, this year we will have some Euphilia glabrescens, some torch that will be ready for that captive to close that cycle. So torch that we've spawned 3 years ago at a size now that we should be able to trigger to spawn. But there's so much we know now when the corals spawn with relative accuracy. So we know that the lunar declination, phases of the moon, the temperatures, we kind of know when they're going to do it. What we don't know is how do we get corals in the right condition year round to spawn when their wild counterparts are going to spawn, or even better, when we want them to spawn, during business hours, ideally. We're still a ways off that. So that's the goal. The goal is to completely close that life cycle, and I'm confident within the next 3 years we'll do that. It's time, money, and passion, right? We got the passion, time. We're a little bit time poor, and money. Well, you can always have more. It's just going to accelerate the process, But we'll get there. Everything is figure-outable, right? Is that a word? No, probably not. But, if you put your heart and soul and your time into it and your expertise, you'll figure it out. But short answer,
So
we're not at that phase yet. Still a little way off.
So, you mentioned that scollies and acans have, limited quota and there's limited geographical collection. Are those kind of the main species you're focused on, or are there other kind of key species you want to focus on conservation-wise that are a top priority?
Yeah, so you can split it really simply, Salem. There's conservation aquaculture for the hobby, and that's going to revolve around unique endemic species, high-value species like your scollies, acans, euphilias, trackies, things like that. And then there's the conservation aquaculture for reef restoration purposes. And the species that we're focusing on there are your reef building species. So Passilloporas, Acroporas, Montiporas. So there's a clear divide in I guess, our spawning operations in where they're destined.
So do you plan on having like two different facilities eventually? Kind of have like a commercial side and a conservation side, or is it mixed, or how's it run right now?
Look, I don't think that's commercially feasible at this stage. Like end of the day, we've still got to make money, and the reef restoration spawning is generally November through to, now, I guess, is when you'd be deploying sort of corals. It's a really short, sharp, busy part of the year. Whereas the conservation aquaculture for the hobby, For example, we have scollies spawning in September, August, September, acans spawn at different times. We can stagger our spawning work through the year. And we can also ideally, eventually, like I said, close that life cycle and spawn just like you would breed clownfish, any time of the year you want. Whereas reef restoration, I think for the initial phase is going to have to be around the natural spawning times, because we still don't know. You could successfully spawn corals out of season in captivity. So you could spawn, 500,000, 1 million Aquapora for ready to go back to the reef. But we don't know what's going to happen if we deploy them in winter, because historically that would never happen to them. So are they going to survive? So I think, I think that conservation aquaculture is still going to be around the natural spawning times until we know more about early stage survivorship out in the wild.
So is there like any concern or regulations that the fisheries have with like you said that a lot of acros are kind of more northern, scolies and the larger trachees are more southern. If you've got those all in the same kind of vat and they're intermixing, would outplanting some of the ones for conservation, have a different microbiome, potentially carry pathogens and stuff from a different region? Is there any regulations on that at all, or concern, I suppose?
That in a nutshell is probably what's holding up the whole wave of conservation aquaculture in Australia. We don't want to be responsible for the next cane toad, which you guys might be aware of. That's silly. Cane toads were introduced in Australia to eat a beetle, and they're just like a massive pest now, we don't want to be responsible for that on the reef. So, those considerations around pests and diseases, genetics, bacterial biome, all that stuff has got to be taken into consideration. And those risks have got to be managed if we're going to put corals back to the reef. Which is why it's taking longer than what I would like. But, that's bureaucracy and getting it right.
It's the marathon.
Yeah, it's the marathon. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
So switching from the conservation angle to kind of more the hobby side. So I know, when Interfish was still around before they, Don got out of it, they were really messing with kind of the designer coral angle. So trying to master getting chimeras to be more prevalent in their spawns. Is that something you all are interested in for the consumer market at all?
Yeah, for sure. We guess we've taken a pragmatic approach. First was, let's just see if we can do it. Great.
Yeah.
We can do it. Let's see if we can actually do it on a commercial level. Okay, tick, we can. We're getting there. Then it's like, all right, what are the marginal gains we can make here? Like, what can we start mucking around with? And chimeras is one of them. And spawning corals for their colours is another. So this year, and we're just starting to see the results now, so it's a little bit early to comment, but so last spawning season with the scollies, we took master grade scollies and ultras and bleeding apples, and we spawned them separately to just mixed general population of broodstock. And we did just small trials of those in their own larval rearing systems, and we've tracked them through. And so now we'll be able to track those through and look at what percentage of the offspring take the parent's coloration, and does that join? How do we get more chimeras? And our gut feeling around chimeras is potentially it's self-fertilization, but we're not sure yet. So there's some pretty interesting stuff. There's multiple PhDs there to work it out.
That'd be pretty cool if you could figure out the kind of Punnett square of scolies, take some like low grade ones and cross them to make some masters. That'd be a pretty commercially viable thing, I feel like.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that's the goal.
So I guess with collection, like, how, like in the US, masters can still fetch like $1,000, or plus, depending on the grade of them.
Yeah.
How rare are they really in the wild? Like, are they actually that rare? Or?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. The majority of scollies that you'll find on your average dive would be, green, dull reds. You even get brown, like you guys just don't. Yeah, grey. Like you get grey scollies.
I've never even seen. That's kind of cool.
Terrible.
I've never even seen that.
They're terrible. Good thing is though that they do have the ability to spawn other colours. When you leave those behind, because our market is so selective. Our harvesting is super selective, so they get left behind and spawn the next generation of different colours. But yeah, in terms of masters, I mean, let's say the average trip, a good trip, you might get one or two. You know, from spending 10 days at sea, you might get a couple.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes you get lucky, but yeah, generally they're not that common.
So I don't know what you guys call these over there. We call them fathead hammers. They're the ones that they can branch. Like they're like the big volleyball or grapefruit sized heads, but they look like a wall. Like the ultra orange ones that are all orange and stuff like that. Where are those guys out of? And you think they're a different species or just, diversity more north or more south or something?
Oh, you're either talking. So you're not talking about branching hammer, not Parancora.
So like I've seen pictures of wild colonies and they do branch, but they look like a wall. It's like a huge head. It's like a mega Parancora. But most people call them walls, but they're different than a wall. So they don't meander. They will bud up. They have like little pups that come out the side, kind of like a normal branching one.
Yeah. Well, without seeing exactly what you're talking about, to me that sounds like, from our perspective, the branching Parancora we get out of the Kimberley region in Western Australia. Their polyps are 2 to 3 times the size of the ones we get from Queensland and the Northern Territory. And when they're in full bloom, they look like a big soccer ball, which, massive heads on them. Really interesting too, when we get into the Northern Territory, there's a strait that separates an island from the mainland. And once you go past there, the branching hammers kind of stop and the wall hammers start. But in between, there's like a mix where you can get almost like a branching wall hammer, like you described, where it's kind of like a bit of both. It's really quite strange. So
Here, I'll share. Here's kind of what I'm talking about, like these guys.
Oh, right.
And then they're like real big heads, but they'll still branch, But it's always like the solid colored tips. Like the walls will kind of have like a bicolor tip. They're always solid tips.
Yeah, I call them the jelly bean hammers, and they're just a really nice, probably a subspecies, who knows, genetics, will have to test that, but of Ancora, of wall hammer. And they just grow a little bit different. One of my favorites, I call them jelly beans.
Yeah, that's the ones I like. I don't really see that many of them, but every time I do, it's like show-stopping, like A-grade quality.
Yeah.
So tell me about Western Australia. A lot of people are saying, Wilsonies are collected with like great whites, kelp forests, too cold, Scolies, maybe they don't last. Like, what are your thoughts on all that stuff?
So Wilsonized, there's two distinct. I reckon they're two distinct species, but it's yet to be, I think, genetically shown. But yeah, the southern species, which are generally like you get the blues and the yellows, and they're really vibrant colours when you first get them. They're in cold water. They are in amongst great whites and probably kelp forests. Not suitable for tropical aquariums, in my opinion. And we've tried to frag them and adapt them over time, but they just don't do well. They live in, I don't know what it would be in Fahrenheit, but 24 degrees for them is like a heat wave, which is standard for tropical aquariums. So they don't do so well. If you move further north past Perth in Western Australia and up to Exmouth and the Kimberley region, Broome and those areas, that's when you get the tropical Wilsonies. They can often start out a lot darker, a lot drab. The main colour on those ones is generally red with stripes of a little bit of blue and green and some tinges of yellow. They do really well in aquariums. They frag relatively well. And the longer you keep them, the better they get under the right conditions. So you can get some fairly dull, ugly ones of those and cook them, colour them up, and they come out mint. They're amazing. So they're the ones that you really want to be trying to find if you're buying Wilsonized, in my humble opinion, is that, they're the tropical variety that live in warm waters. And the button scolies, they're generally found in northern Western Australia, and we would find them to the Northern Territory, and up there they're a bit bigger, and they're the Croc Island Scollies. For me, they've always done pretty well, but they are found in dirty, shallow water. They're a completely different environment to your Homophila, your Scollies out of Mackay and Queensland. So I think they require a little bit less light, a lot of feeding, indirect flow. They don't like being blasted, but they like a lot of flow. You know, there's big tidal movements in those areas, but it's laminar flow. It's not a direct point hammering them like you would get with an acro. So, you know, if you can imagine that.
Kind of like a wall hammer, kind of like flow above them, but not on them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the Croc, I've not really seen any Croc Island Scollies in a couple of years. So is that just like kind of one because they're a little bit bigger than the normal buttons? Yeah. So is it just like one more northern region?
Yeah,
there's that endemic there, or what?
Yeah, it's one particular reef. That's the only spot we've found them in any decent numbers, and we've kind of just put the brakes on it because we need to find other areas. You know, we don't want to be taking them from that area anymore. So the focus on those will be aquaculture until we can find, you know, new areas where they are, and I'm sure we will. It's like every coral that I've found whilst diving, you'll find one or two, and then you'll find their epicenter. You know, their home of homes where they're just dominant. They're the dominant species there, and then they sort of filter out from there onto different reefs, different regions.
So in terms of, you know, everything you've collected throughout the years, what do you consider to be the actual kind of rarest coral?
It's probably the Croc Island Scolly.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense if it's only one region. Yeah, that's.
Yep. I would say the Croc Island Scolly for that region. A really random one out of Northern Territory too is the Trunco flip out trunca.
Oh yeah. The Baroni, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like
just
the NPS, yeah.
Yeah, just a random mud-dwelling coral that we just happened to stumble across, you know, as we're drifting when the anchor come loose, sort of thing. That's a super rare one that we haven't been able to find anywhere else. Yeah.
Oh, I feel better now. I've got one.
Yeah, good now. Oh, I love them.
True collector.
Yeah.
I guess, do you think there's any underrated species that you see on the reefs that are not popular in the trade, that are CITES legal, that should be in the hobby, or you think could be in the hobby?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I often ponder this because, you know, being an exporter and owning your business, it's all about what the customer wants. You know, what does the market want? It drives what we collect, what we harvest, what we spawn, what we propagate. And then we all have our personal favorites. And yeah, you're often surprised sometimes by what people like versus what you find interesting out on the reef. I guess for me, I'm always driven by what the market wants. So that's, you know, like if I'm diving and harvesting, that's what takes my eye. But in the background there, I've really got a good appreciation for NPS. So Gorgonians, Dendronethia, you know, the different NPS corals that we see on the reef, because some areas we dive, they're the dominant variety, you know, and there's so many different colorations, and like Dendronethia, like some of the colors, and they just blow me away. You know? Gorgonians, some of the colors and the shapes, like they're mad. I love them. But yeah, very underrepresented in the hobby, obviously because they require a lot of feeding. They're harder to keep. But yeah, I got a soft spot for them. I quite, you know, they often take my eye if I'm diving. I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. That's pretty cool. And then I'll move on to what I'm actually trying to find.
So when you find those NPS dominant reefs, is like the water more turbid? Are they a river mouth, or kind of where are they geographically located? I mean, is there an indication there's a lot of nutrients, or not
definitely.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. If you're finding them on the outer reef, it's on the slopes. So it's on the reef slope where the marine snow and plankton and everything will fall down, and where they get the big tidal movement. If it's coastal, it's wherever the water is turbid. dirty. Yeah, you'll find them and a lot of soft corals, and they're the dominant, like a really an area where we get, say, scribble angelfish. That's dominated by whip corals, so gorgonians and dendronephias and other MPS. It's a murky sort of coastal type feel to it.
So I've heard, this is kind of switching gears, but kind of in the same light. So Goniopora, I've heard a lot about, everyone's always talking about dosing iron and manganese. They can't get enough of it. And I've heard a lot of gonies, at least in Australia, are found very close to river mouths with kind of like red clay sediments.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the validity of those claims?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Gonies are kind of widespread, but for example, so red goniopora, and the tequila sunrises and those really fancier ones, they're coastal. So that's when we're harvesting acans a lot of the time. We'll find those. Then if you were to look at the golf ball goniopora, so the yellow Stokes eye goniopora, which have been around for a long time in the hobby, they're actually an interreefal species. So they're found up towards Cairns in between the reefs. So what I mean by interreefal is you can imagine a reef rising up out of the bottom. You've got your acro and your reef slope with your different corals. And in between the next reef is a vast area of just sand and mud. And it's, 15 to 25, 30 metres deep. And that's where you find the Stokes eye, the golf ball gonies, and they're just resting in the mud. And there's thousands of them. And in the same habitat, you'll find Duncanopsamia, you'll find fungias, Cycloceras, trackies, all in that interreefal desh. So desh corals are in that interreefal zone. That's where the Stokes eye are found. Then if you go out to the outer reef where you've got clean water and it's shallow, in amongst the acro, you'll find gonies too. You'll find, branching gonioperas. You'll find the Bernardipora are out there in that clear water. The orange Bernardiporas are out there in that clear water. So tarnishing gonies with one brush, you can't. Like they're so varied.
That's probably why people have so many issues when they try to do a one-size-fits-all and keep all the different species together. And as you described, completely different environments. Then you've got the Indonesian stuff, and who knows what's going on with those.
Yeah, I haven't done enough diving over there. But, gonies are pretty widespread. Yeah, they're found in all the environments.
So where are the Elegance typically found? Because you got kind of the cone. You guys have the cone bottom and the kind of wall ones both, don't you?
Yep. So two distinct habitats for those. So the walling cats, shallow. So when I say shallow water, down to 12, 15 sort of tops. Murky water, big tidal current. We find those in one particular island that all the harvesters know about in southern Queensland has been where all the wall hammers out of Queensland have come for the past 15 years. Of one strip, one big massive patch, and just work the outsides and it grows back. Work the outsides, it grows back. It's like one massive mega colony that is just easy to get to, and it's in other places, but it's just one area that everyone sort of knows about. The cone bottom ones, we find those further north, same in that interreefal zone with the trackies, the golf ball gonioperas, 15 to 35 metres deep in the mud, individually sitting there in the mud, growing away in that triangle shaped. Western Australia, it's all walling cataphilia, again in that shallow, turbid water. So totally different environments.
What do you think the most difficult coral you've had to collect is? Like whether it's deep or dangerous, etc. What's kind of the hardest one to actually go out and get?
Okay, so environmental conditions, I would say that it'd be like a close tie between the crocodile and scully and the scully from Queensland. Reason being is that you're often in deeper water, so just diving in deeper water is inherently more dangerous, and strong tidal movements. So I'm talking tidal movements that you can't swim against. So if you time your dive incorrectly, you will be washed away to the end of your hose. Luckily we're on surface supply, so we're connected by a 150 metre long hose. sometimes the tides are so bad that you will just be swept away and you'll be having to be dragged back to the boat by the person on the boat. So yeah, that can be really challenging for those two species. But in terms of, most people will do that. Yeah, most divers are happy to do that. It's hard to find divers who are going to want to go and get the Euphilia parancora in WA and Northern Territory. The conditions there, generally speaking, like 3 foot visibility would be good. Yeah, and on a bad day, you can see a hand here, and you go out to there and you can't see it. So you're collecting by braille. And on top of that, there's crocodiles in the area.
Yeah, that's okay. I see why some of those nice hammers are expensive now.
Yeah,
the hazard pay with them.
That takes the cake. Like, that really sorts out the divers on who's willing to do that and who's not. Yeah.
So is that like, the hot mess? Is it like, are surrounded by crocodile, like breeding grounds? Like, what are we talking about that?
100%. Yeah. So when we're collecting hot messes, reverse stems, the marbles, all the classic hammers that we kind of, I guess, known for, or that, we really did discover them up there. They were not really on the market for that. That's all crocodile country and bull shark country. And yeah, it's dirty diving, bad visibility, big tides. You've got a time. You can only dive on those sites for 1 or 2 weeks per month. There's a small window where you can dive them. Everything's got to line up to dive it properly. And we need to have someone on board watching the divers with a shotgun. It's that dangerous. Yeah.
So is it like, how often do you have to use the shotgun? Is that like pretty common?
Not often, but it's just you want it there. We're legally allowed to have it there. We've all got special licenses that and we're not out there to kill the animals. It's just there to, if we have to use it. Yeah, for human safety, then we've got to use it. Yeah.
So what makes it so turbid in those regions? Is there like a lot of river runoff, or is it just the amount of plankton, or what, sediment? I mean,
it's not plankton, it's sediment. And river runoff is one of them, but it's kind of like the tidal movement. So the tidal movement in the outer reefs where the clear water is, say off Cairns, is, you get a 3 to 4 metre difference between the tides. Places like that, you can get 7 to 12 metre differences in the tidal movement. So the veracity, the force of the tide, just lifts up heaps more sediment and moves it around, pushes it around, and those regions are just generally dirtier. Even like inshore, Bundaberg, Cairns, Mackay, all those regions, it's dirty water from the waves and the silt and all that. And then you've got to get further out to get the clear water. But, majority of the corals that you guys want and the hobby wants, they're in that dirtier water, that dirty. It's either dirty and shallow or it's deep. That's where the good corals are.
Nothing easy, huh?
No, the only easy one is acro, and that's one of my favourite corals to collect. You can spend all day cruising around collecting acro, no worry about getting the bends, or, it's in shallow water, it's clear water, it's what you would take a tourist on, but the other places you would never put a tourist in the water.
So let's pivot a little bit from collecting coral to collecting fish, since you all are also a fish supplier. So, it's controversy, but it still happens, unfortunately. There's a lot of TNT and cyanide for fish collection. Yeah. What does sustainable or ethical fish collection look like? What's that process look like when you guys go and dive and get stuff?
Okay, so that word sustainable, I think we hear it a lot. It's thrown around a lot. And I don't think everyone understands what it means and what it was originally, I guess, used for. Because some people think sustainable is, don't take from the wild at all. That's unsustainable. But the actual definition of sustainable is meeting the present needs of people without compromising the future needs of the future generations, right? So sustainability in essence is, what is the level that we can harvest or take or catch without compromising that population for future generations? So if it's done correctly, our hobby is extremely sustainable. fisheries management sustainability, they often look at it from the MSY, which is the maximum sustainable yield. So what's the largest average catch you can take from that population given the current environmental conditions? So that's when they'll do fish stock assessments and biomass assessments and that sort of stuff, and they'll calculate what's the maximum take. A little bit harder to do with coral and even in the aquarium fishery with so many species. But sustainability is all about, what can you take now that isn't going to take away from future generations? And is it sustainable from an environmental point of view, a social point of view, and an economic point of view? And that's where we look at what's your MEY, your maximum economic yield. So where is the amount that you take most profitable? And then beyond or below that becomes less profitable. So sustainability's got a lot of aspects to sort of think about. But the way I look at it is this taking away from future generations? And if it is, it's not sustainable. So when you talk about TNT, definitely that's not sustainable. That's taking away habitat, massive populations of fish, and also unintended fish. So with a net fishery, there's zero bycatch. You're using a net that I'm not sure if people are aware, but the barrier net is sort of 7 to 12 meters long. It's not very long. I don't know what that is in feet, maybe double that. And it's made up of very fine mesh that the fish can't see, and then they sort of hit it, and majority of them don't get tangled. So you just come through with your scoop net and you take those fish that are just bouncing against that net trying to get out, and then the rest you just let go. So no bycatch. Really targeted. You're not damaging the fish that you're collecting, and you're not damaging the reef around it. So to me, that's extremely sustainable. But it's a lot harder. It takes a lot longer. I could imagine that I've never done it, but collecting with cyanide would be pretty quick and easy. But it's not socially sustainable because word gets out and people are like, aquarium fish just die, they're a cut flower. Shit, no, they're not. These things should live their whole life happily, healthy in captivity and reproduce. Whereas with cyanide fishing, it's not the case. They look good, they turn up at the wholesaler, they get to the retailer and they end up in your tank and they die some weeks or months later because of their original collection. So that's 100% not sustainable from a social point of view. If we keep doing that, we're going to lose our social license to operate, which is community support. And if we're honest, we're already on a bit of a knife's edge with a lot of people around the world, a lot of lobbying groups, and not even extreme groups anymore, just average Joes who think that, should you be keeping these animals in captivity? Is human dominance over animals even acceptable? So that's what we're up against. So we need to take into effect that social aspect and the environmental aspect I spoke about, and then the economic aspect. And that's probably where net collecting with fish is sometimes not sustainable from an economic point of view because of the labour and the skill that it takes to collect those fish versus, say, the return you'd get from coral. It's way less, So it's a complex topic, sustainability. It's not easily answered, but net collection is definitely the way to go. I really urge people, if you've got any doubts or inkling that your fish are being harvested by any other method than a net, I'd seriously reconsider buying that and supporting that industry. I don't really know how prevalent it is these days because in Australia, we just don't do that. Everything we collect is net collected. Our fish collectors are really skilled, specific operators. So our fish collectors and coral collectors are generally different people. Fish collectors are really good at reading the animal's behaviour and understanding each species' behaviour and how to, intervene at the right time to catch that fish. Versus coral collectors have a really keen eye for that little gem that might poke out of another 1,000 pieces, that they've got a spot. Fish collectors often get bored collecting coral. They find it boring. So they're different people, yeah.
What are some of the more challenging fish to catch, whether that be rarity, they're good hiders, or even depth? What are some of those species that we may see in the hobby coming from Australia?
I'm going to full disclosure. I'm not a good fish collector. So for me, they're all pretty bloody hard. So one of our guys, Owen, who works with us, he's like an exceptional fish collector. We've got Remy and Lindsay who also work with us. They've been doing it for a long time. And I think they would probably say harlequin tuskfish are a pretty difficult one. And then in terms of like deep diving and the risks around that, like a lot of the cerebrus, the fairy wrasse that we get out of the Northern Territory, so your monsoon wrasse, sunsets, they're sort of 20 to 45 metres deep. So collecting fish at that depth can be, quite challenging, and big tidal movements up there that will just knock your net flat down. So you've really got to be right time, right place, and manage your dives so you don't go into decompression and get the bends.
So I think as the kind of final wrap-up thing, I'm going to give you plenty of time to plug your business. Why don't you walk us through the whole supply chain? Like if someone's in the United States that's an importer, what does it look like to order from you? And what's the work like for you to get that product to them, to the U.S. market or any other market globally? What does Monsoon do on the day-to-day?
Wow, okay. Ooh, a lot. So Monsoon Aquatics has got like 35 staff that operate, and we can all sort of help each other and do each other's jobs, but then we're siloed into our responsibilities. So process from harvest to unboxing essentially is that the divers and the skipper will plan the trip, and they'll plan that trip based on what the sales reps want. So for your export market, it's Shane and Juno for the farmed. They will say, okay, I need X amount of Acropora, and I'm going to need this species and that species, and not all of them are found in the one spot. So the skipper has to plan his trip, based on the weather, where these different corals are, the dive profiles, do the deeper stuff first and the shallow stuff last, take into account all of that. And then they'll plan the trip, they'll head out on the trip, and then every day they've got to plan their dives. What are we targeting this dive? What do we got to watch out for in terms of dangers, depths, profiles, all that sort of stuff? The divers will go down for coral and they'll either chip a part of a big coral off or they'll take the whole colony. And then they've got to actually, when they're choosing a coral, you've got to remember that we're swimming over hundreds of pieces that we spoke about before. You guys have never seen a grey or brown scully, like they're there. The majority of the Acropora on the reef is brown, green, or pale blue, sort of, you got to swim over hundreds of these pieces till you find the right colour. And then that piece with the right colour has got to have the right shape. It's got to be intact. People don't want to buy patchy bits of coral with dead patches. Got to be the right shape. It's got to be the right size. And then they've got to harvest that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen opal miners, on Discovery Channel, they've got opal miners, banging away underground with a hammer and chisel. And if they find an opal, they'll stop and they'll carefully go around this thing and try and get the whole piece out. And if they break it, they're heartbroken. They're devastated. It's the same thing with the coral. If you're diving and you find that perfect scully, I take a bit of a moment to sort of gather myself, to find the exact right position, the way I'm going to chip this coral off, because if you break it, it's destined for the farm, you can still frag it, but you've broken that beautiful opal, so to speak. So the guy's super careful underwater, collecting to the orders, comes back up on the dory. They've got to manage it on the dory for the day, and then it goes to the mothership, and that's where it gets processed. So you're picking off any sponges or boring clams or anything like that that's going to affect the coral long term or even short term on the mothership. Every single piece gets weighed, recorded into the logbook, and then you rinse and repeat for 10 days up to 3 weeks. That coral comes back to the facility. Then every single piece is trimmed, getting off the excess rock. The way we look at it is we want it to look like a bakery or a candy shop or a sushi shop where they're all just beautiful, nice, uniform pieces. Get out all the boring mussels and clams and sponges, anything that's been left, dip them, preventative dip, sort of a quarantine type thing. They go into general population. That's when the sales guys come in. The sales team then actually puts an inventory up on our live site. So our export customer, most of our domestic customers use our live inventory, so they can see in real time what's available with pictures. Once they order it, goes off the website, it's theirs. Some of our export customers do that, where others will just message or call Shane and say, this is what I want. Go for your life. Here's your budget. He'll go around and pick it all. And that's the best scenario for us because we get to a bit of artistic freedom with what we ship. So that the sales guys will take that inventory, they'll get the order, and then look, to be honest, often it takes heaps of photos back and forward with customers. Customers are picky. We get that and we respect that. It's a lot of money and it's a lot of risk, so they want to know what they're getting. So a lot of that we do WYSIWYG. You'll see if you follow us on Insta or Facebook, you can see our WYSIWYG items. And then from there, once they've sold, they get moved into a separate area where they again get checked over. Is there any disease, any pests, anything on this before it's going to get to the customer? And then the packing team will come in, pack those corals, fill out the CITES form, make sure the numbers are all correct. Because if we get one number wrong, plus or minus, or a species name wrong, that whole shipment can get seized. US Fish and Wildlife can be real sticklers for details if they want to. And every region has different importing laws and a different interpretation of the CITES documents. So it is really challenging space. I'm glad I don't do it. Back in the days when I did everything, that was the most stressful part of the job, was that packing and making sure that every number and species was correct. When you're talking like a 40-box shipment, it gets daunting. And add to that most of the packing for exports start at 1 a.m. and then they'll finish at 10 a.m. sort of thing to get, aeroplanes not going to wait for us. We put our product on passenger planes. So the least of their thoughts, the captain's thoughts, of the live coral sitting in the hold. Like, if it's not there, it's not there. He's going. So that's kind of the process. It's convoluted. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and it takes a really good team to do it well consistently.
Would you say the U.S. is the biggest customer you guys have, or any other countries?
No, US.
U.S.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like we need to log in, and you got to keep us in the loop when you get some Croc Island schoolies again.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, it'll happen. Yep, it'll happen.
I was wondering when that whole Salem asking for free coral thing was going
to come in. Yeah.
I waited till the end, man. I'm doing a lot of Aussie biotopes though, and I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, cool.
You know, have more of like a nutrient heavy one with some mud or something now. They're kind of like mimicking that inner reef kind of zone. I feel like that'd be a cool tank. I don't know. Not seen anyone do that.
You actually need the visible silt just constantly drummed up, like so you can barely see the coral. Like
a black water reef tank.
That's what does our head in, right? Like, how do you maintain water clarity, for husbandry, and so you can see the stuff, but give them enough of what they need? It's tricky. And
I've got an idea for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm going to need some NPS you talked about, though. That'll be that tank, I think. It's an experiment. We'll see if it might fail gloriously and it all dies. I don't know.
Well, we talk about it. We talk about it here a lot. Like, for instance, acans, right? So the acans are found right off maybe 500-600 meters from my office where I am now. Just right at the river mouth, you'll find acans. At the moment, it's like iced coffee. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And it's like that for weeks on end. Big swell, like we're surfing, here, massive waves. And then in winter, it can be dead calm, almost crystal clear, but not quite, for weeks on end. Yeah, so these corals are like It's not a constant environment like we provide them within the aquarium. So where's
Yeah.
the sweet spot of par? Like some days they're getting blasted with 400 plus par, and other days it'd be 50 if they're lucky for days, weeks on end. That's what we're trying to
you gotta make like a
farm.
lighting profile. You test the par like every day for a year and graph it out and like program the lights to like the intensity for a whole year long program.
You could, but where do they do best? I mean, are they just hanging on during those times? Are they just barely surviving? You know, sometimes I will see events happen here, and my normal spearfishing spots, you know, I'll be like, surely they've got to be dead. Like they can't survive 3, 4, 5 weeks of muddy water and big waves. And sure enough, jump in, the same acans are there, the same acros, and they're happy as Larry, you know. So there's a lot more to it than we know.
Yeah, it's so funny how we get so bent out of shape about like green hair algae in our tank, and you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and these guys are just getting pounded, like you said, in the wild with
Hurricane.
everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I really want to test what's coming out of the river mouth, because that every person I've talked to from Australia has said, like you said, like a lot of the really nice Ghanies are there. You said Lords are there. Go on to like an ICP and the microbiome and the DOC. Just test everything in that area, because that's probably what you need to dose theoretically to keep those things happy. That's what they're getting constantly.
Yeah, potentially. But then, is there a way of imitating nature that gives them everything they need? Like I said, maybe they don't need that exact environment, because you know, then you do get acans on the Sunshine Coast further south where the water is a lot clearer and cooler.
That's why, like, I feel like it's got to be like a biotope. You gotta like the way to make them really happy would be, you know, the like the diving profile, like the collection site profile, and then you get those species and you mimic like the trace elements to that region or something. That's probably like the next level, and they do that in freshwater all the time. Amazon and stuff, but
yeah, they do.
Really.
Yeah, it's just going to make keeping a well-rounded aquarium like impossible, because you guys like, yeah, if you want to keep acans, then you're going to limit yourself to acans, some gonies, gorgonians, some pretty crappy looking chalice, and brown acro. Right, that's what you get amongst.
Sounds kind of like a cool tank, though. Like who's done that? You know, like perfect mimicry of nature tank.
We're trying like
to 0.001% of the hobby equals Salem is the only person.
And from a farming point of view, like we don't have that luxury, so we tend to divide things up into par, water flow, and nutrients. So we have our, you know, acans, trackies, scollies, cats, things like that at a lower par, different water flow with a different nutrient feeding regime, to our reef building corals, acros, Pisciloporas, montes, things like that. So we tend to sort of generalize a bit broader, because we can't afford to have 20 different systems for each biotope.
Yeah.
So we've got to find that magic sweet spot, which it's bloody hard, you know, like it's not, Yeah,
I think that's probably got to be one of the more challenging things for any wholesaler, retailer, whatever, is, you know, I feel like it takes a special kind of nerd, right, to enjoy this, and then to go into business with that. So you have a special taste of coral that 90% of the hobby doesn't have, right?
Yeah.
So you're thinking the hobby is mainly the fluorescing corals, the flowy corals, the easy ones to care for, and that may not be your taste, but that's kind of where you're at, is like, well, I have to make money here, so I got to provide for the 90%, you know.
Yeah, we've got to cater to the market. Yeah. My one of my favorite corals is still Acropora, because to me, you can make it. I really love freshwater scapes, you know, like the Takeshi Yamano style, but he started that. I really want to see that in reef aquariums sort of take off and evolve. That's
I've got something coming for you then.
Awesome. I love it, because like to me, Acropora is like underwater bonsai. You know, you can create Acropora scapes that on a miniature scale represent the actual reef. What I'm seeing when I'm diving, you can, with a good acro tank, replicate that, you know, from starting off with frags Whereas with scollies and acans and things like that, you can be a collector and have all those cool pieces which are individually beautiful. Those pieces are amazing, and I get why people do that. But it doesn't represent what we're seeing out there in the wild. It's a different take on it. So I really appreciate aquarists who can imitate nature to surpass its beauty, is what Takeshi Amano would say back in the. Forget, I'm 49 years old, so I can still remember when we used under gravel filters for reef aquariums.
Yeah,
so, and I remember Takeshi Amano coming out with his Nature World Aquarium book and just blowing my mind. I'm just like, what is this? Let's go. I want to see that in the reef space.
Since the car hit the studio, I get the luxury of redoing it all and getting a lot of new tanks. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And I've been watching a ton of ADA stuff and reading all the Amano stuff.
Yeah, the principles.
No one has brought this to saltwater. Yeah. Well, I got 50 tanks to mess with now. So Iwagumi style reef tank or something. I don't know. I'm going to mess around with it, I think.
I'd love to.
I was thinking Aussie biotopes for some of those. Capture the little slice of the regions no one's highlighted. Yeah. I don't know. I got to mess with it.
Yeah,
I think the thing you got to get over as a hobbyist, if you're thinking about doing something different, is getting past the collector-itis that Jake and Mark always used to talk about, and just getting one of it. Like this red sea back here is a perfect example of just, I like it, I see it, I buy it. Yeah. But if you really want to create that, Takashi Amano ADA kind of freshwater, like you're looking at maybe 1 or 2 or 3 species for the entire tank, as opposed to a mixed reef like everyone has. Yeah. And that takes a lot of discipline. It's so hard to go into the local reef store and not pull the trigger on something that doesn't fit in the scape because it doesn't fit in the scape, Well,
have your frag tank out the back, right? And that's your Pokemon. Got to collect them all, right? Got to collect them all. And I look at that with our scolly frags. Like that's an underrated coral because you could collect all the colors of the scollies in the frags, and watch them grow and have that beautiful process in your frag tank. And like I said, have that beautiful display tank that, most people, when they look at a reef tank that's just a multiple mix of collector-itis, they look at it and go, oh, it's cool, it's colorful. But if they look at a really well-scaped aquarium that brings around that sense of serenity and the wild, and like you said, maybe is a handful of species, they're like, wow, that's living art. It's different. So you can still be a collector and then have your forward-facing display tank that gives you that scenery. I'm passionate about it. Love to see what you get up to, Salem.
I've got Manila Spy, right? And I know that you do too, Salem. It probably is one of the only things that's still living over there. But it's Manila Spy is like a branching Montipora. It's so cool. Okay. It grows fast, and I've got a piece of it over here, and I'm thinking, what if I put it here and here and here and here, and really fill out? Yeah, it's a red orange coral. It's not ugly, so I don't know. I might do that.
Yeah, cool.
I think you should. You kind of dissed him the whole time, but I think you should put some brown scollies on there because I think. Any collector I know that has collector-itis, they've got every master and chimeras and everything, but they don't have a brown scolie, and that would contrast everything on the rocks so well. I feel like it would be a hot item. I've never seen one. Like you said that, I'm like, holy shit, they exist. I want one now.
All the monsoon cowpie.
Yeah. If you want a dog's butt scully, hit me up. We can do
it. Yeah. 17K. No one brings them in. It's really labor
super rare.
Real deep.
Never seen on the market. A tinge of chocolate gray. You'll love it.
No, like the gray ones, you got to call them like those wrought iron butterflies. You got to think of like chainmail scully or something. There's
chainmail.
Metalhead. I don't know. There's some trade name there.
I'll tell Juno to start fragging up some of the grey ghost face scollies or something, or chain link scollies. Yeah.
Okay. So for your next article, send me a picture of one of them, and I'm going to post it. Monsoon Aquatics brings in chainmail scully, and I guarantee it'll blow up. I guarantee it will.
All right. Yeah, I'll have to convince the divers to bring one back.
We'll do the litmus test on the American market.
Yeah, we'll do an update in the next podcast of Salem's claims here and see if he's actually
It
correct.
has 17 million views. It went viral. The highest demand coral now in the world.
Yeah.
Brown Scully.
Before we get out of here, did you guys already talk about any upcoming plans? Sorry, my internet actually went out during this podcast where I was gone for about half of it. I know it's
cacophony of IT mistakes. This one
always is. What's next for Monsoon? I know you guys have upcoming projects, expansions. Let us know what's in the future for you guys.
Yep. Okay, cool. What's next for us? So we've sort of just accessed the Coral Sea in Australia. So Labooties and Scott's wrasse and for us redline cleaner shrimp and different sort of fish and invertebrates throughout in the Coral Sea. Really honing in on our wild collections in Northern Territory. We've got a few new areas we're going to explore this year that I've got some good feelings about. And then I guess the big step for us this year is we've got our first reef restoration project approved, lined up in a harbour near our Bundaberg site, working with a couple of universities and the Port Corporation there to 3-year project to start looking at restoring some parts of the reef there, testing the structures we're using and slowly graduating to spawn corals going back on the reef that are selected for their heat tolerance. That's really exciting for us, and I've got a really good feeling that we'll be able to expand that to the northern regions of Australia this summer as well. So conservation aquaculture is big on our radar and our business plan for this year.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I've got one final question, which I forgot about it until now.
Yeah.
Where are you finding the glitter gonnies at? Like, you don't have to tell me like region, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, what's the environment like?
Latitude and longitude of.
Yeah, I'm gonna need the GPS coordinates.
You tell me. No. Yeah, they're one of those. Yeah. It's like finding a gemstone in a mine. You know, they're random. There is some like Mackay region. Really is I guess. That southern to central GBR is where we find the most of them. Haven't found any in the Northern Territory. Haven't really found any in WA. We haven't found any in Cairns or the Northern Reef. We find them in the southern GBR. Generally inshore or midshore islands or rocky reefs, rocky coastlines. They can be sitting next to a brown Goniopora. You know, it's just like this diamond in the rough. Yeah, they're like when you see them, you often don't know it's a glitter gonny until you really get up close, and then you're like, oh wow, okay, let's take some time on this. Juno is like just always wanting glitter gonnies for our propagation, and we want to spawn them, but it's just one of those things. That, that's going to be cool, right?
Chimera glitter gonny, that's what I'm hearing. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that we can't say, oh yeah, we're going to go here on Tuesday on this tide and get glitter gonnies. Yeah.
So they're on the rocks then, not like on the substrate, like the
100% on rocks. Yeah. So they're habitat-wise rocky reefs, inshore to midshore, coastal or islands, from that sort of, Keppel Islands up to Whitsundays, sort of southern central GBR.
So southern central, what's that like temp-wise compared to like where the acros are?
You still get acro in that region, right? But it's generally it's the inshore Milloporas, and if you go out to a system of reefs called the Swains, there's lots of offshore acro there. Probably should clarify, when I talk about when we harvest acro, we get it from Cairns because it's so close to the facility, versus the Acropora that comes out of Mackay is a long way out on the reef. So it's that, what's that economic yield? You know, where we're going to get the most bang for buck? For us, it's in Cairns.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
You still do get acro in that southern, north and central GBR. We just find more variety, better colours, closer to shore in the northern region. But no, glitter gonny is definitely inshore. There's a clear divide on the reef where you have that inshore region, which is generally bigger tidal movement, muddier water, shallower, and islands with deep drop-offs and stuff, versus offshore. When you get to probably what a lot of people picture as a real reef, that's the offshore Great Barrier Reef here. So that's in some places 50, 60 plus miles out to sea, where you hit that outer reef. And then that's the barrier that stops all the waves and everything that protects the coastline reefs. Past that is the continental shelf that drops off, to 500 plus meters. So a lot of the time when people think of coral reefs, they're thinking of that offshore outer reef, clear water, very low nutrients. It turns out there's not much coral out there. Like where we collect the Scots wrasse, the booties, and the offshore in the Coral Sea, there's very little coral out there. Same with the monsoon wrasse in the Northern Territory. There's very little coral in those areas. And you can be 20, 30 meters deep and see the bottom from the boat. It's just, there's just no nutrients. There's nothing in the water there, so there's not much coral.
So what coral is there, if any?
So Darwin, so offshore there, we get branching GSP, so green star polyp, really huge mats of it, and it goes into this branching shape. It's really cool. A lot of clavularia out there, so the clove polyps, fireworks, a lot of fireworks out there. And then you just get some like pretty dull standard acros and monties. Christmas rock does come from some of that cleaner water, so that beautiful parietes and Montiporas and Cyphastreas with the worms in them, but not the diversity that you see inshore. So most of the tourists, for example, that come here to Bundaberg, there's an island that everyone goes to called Lady Musgrave Island. And we do tours through our facility. It's part of, I guess, helping our social license as a hobby and getting more people into the hobby and showing people the farm, getting them passionate about reefs and aquariums. So they may come in here before they go to the island or after. Now, if they come here after they've been to the island, they come in here and they just go, we didn't see any of this out on the island. We just saw brown sort of hard coral. We didn't see, and it was boring compared to this, and you've got to explain to them that the different habitats, that reef out there is actually quite healthy, but it doesn't have the colors of the species that we harvest from, which is generally inshore. So a lot of the 99% of divers, they can be seasoned divers and walk through the farm here and just go like, I've never seen corals like this in my whole diving career, because they're not diving the dirty coastal areas where it's not fun.
Yeah, interesting. So if someone wants to order from you,
yep,
and if someone wants to book a tour, where can they do that? Where can they find Monsoon Aquatics?
So www.monsoonaquatics.com.au. It's got links there to book a tour, and it's got links there to register as a customer. For US customers, we're wholesale only. So if you're a hobbyist and you follow us on Insta or Facebook and you see a WYSIWYG item that you really want, just hit up your local LFS and get them to contact their wholesaler, and they can get that piece for you. But yeah, website's the first point of call, and follow us on socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook. I put out a TikTok, so we're getting around.
It was very good, by the way, and it was so you. I feel like it was you.
Yeah,
Juno nailed it for you.
Yeah, it was Juno. Yeah, I'm not taking the credit for that. Like, I put my touch on it, but Juno wrote it for sure. Yeah. She actually, Juno wants me to do a video today. I've got to wish everyone a happy Chinese New Year in 4 different languages. So look out for that one. That should be fun.
You guys got to get red now. We got it. We're like in tap with like the Chinese market now.
Yeah. Okay. What is it? Redden.
There's it's TikTok, but pretty much like all like of the Chinese consumers. So like everything is in Mandarin on the app for the most part. But
when TikTok was down for 6 hours, or when it was banned for 6 hours in the United States, everybody jumped to Red Note.
We saw that over here. I saw that, just like, whoa, man, some people are really addicted to that. I mean, I get it if you're a business, right? You've got a platform for your business. You want to migrate to a new one.
It wasn't businesses, unfortunately. It was
people. Yeah, just
it was definitely addiction.
What have we come to?
But yeah, I jumped on Red Note immediately, and there's like a ton of there's like a huge market in Hong Kong and Shanghai and stuff that I've I don't even know. And I mean, there's
Oh,
some
yeah.
crazy pieces I've never even seen.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
there you go. And if
China.
you're doing Chinese New Year, it's perfect.
Yeah. Well, for the past, I think since COVID happened, China's been off limits for Australian imports. So we haven't been able to get our product to China. So hoping that that's about to change. And so, yeah, Redden, I'll check it out, man. Thanks.
Yeah, there you go. Red now. Well, cool.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Daniel. I know you got to hop off and get on with your day,
Yeah.
but we really appreciate you coming on the Reef Therapy Podcast. We'd love to have you on again at some point this year. That'd be awesome to get an update, and maybe we can visit you at some point this year. That would be great too.
Yeah. That'd be
Is Cali Kid, are they one of your LFSs here in the United States? Because if not, they need to be.
hit them up. I'm not
Cali
sure,
Kid
man. These days I'm a little bit removed from the sales side of it. Yeah, but yeah, we've got a good reach in the States. But yeah, if you haven't heard of us, please hit us up.
We'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah, cool.
Cali Kid Corals is a sponsor of Reef Therapy, and
Yep.
You can head over to their website, calikidcorals.com/reef builders. You can sign up to get their text messages for all their auctions and everything like that. You'll also get 15% off your next auction purchase or WYSIWYG purchase. And as always, we'll give away a couple $50 gift cards to enter if you tell us your favorite Aussie coral. I think we mentioned quite a bit in this podcast, so if you're not familiar with where your coral's coming from, just pull something out of what you heard today and let us know in the comments section. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Thank you.